Welcome to the Euro Step Brit podcast.
Game's going to be decided here. Harold spots up, doesn't go, putback is good! Roberto Gallinet with a second chance opportunity. Aris lead. Per Gunther for three, got it! Per Gunther 3 punta. Courage inside for Gordon for the dunk. Ball game.
Hello and welcome to episode 9 of the Euro Step Brit podcast. We'll call this one From One BBL to Another. My guest this week is Thorsten Leibenath. Once the head coach of Scottish Rocks, these days Thorsten is the sporting director at Ratiopharm. Regular listeners will know I always enjoy the chance to discuss Ulm, so I was delighted when Thorsten agreed to jump on the podcast. So many topics were discussed, far too many to mention in this intro, which of course means it's a longer episode than normal. So, without further ado, let's get to it.
Thorsten, welcome to the podcast. I just want to take you back to 2006. You've been assistant coach at Gießen for 6 years, and then suddenly there's an opportunity to go to Glasgow and Braehead, and where they were playing those days, and the Scottish Rocks. How did it all come about?
Well, I always wanted to become a head coach. That was my clear idea, and so I spoke to Chris Finch about it, who worked in Gießen as well, and I was his assistant coach during that stint. And we kept in contact, and he said, well, I might have something interesting for you, because back then he was also coaching the British national team. And he kept his contacts in Great Britain, and he knew that the Scottish Rocks were looking for a new coach, and they rather wanted to go with some sort of European flavor in it, less American basketball, but more an approach where like European basketball is somewhat highlighted, like team basketball, more tactical stuff, less one-on-one. So he suggested I should speak to Ian Reid, or he brought up my name to Ian, and that's how I got an interview, and I got the job finally.
And what were your first impressions when you came to Scotland?
Well, first impressions of basketball, not as far developed as I was hoping. The whole league in Great Britain and the standards, the practice opportunities, all was a little bit different, and I felt that there's a big opportunity in developing that. But I would also know that there's quite a few challenges in terms of the country, the people. I can say I had to adjust a little bit, driving on the wrong side of the street and all of that. But I quickly learned to love Scotland, and I still do.
And let's look at the team. I mean, you had before I get into the players' team, did you have any control over that roster in terms of recruitment, or was that team recruited for you?
No. I would say I had total control. We had a few players that were on contracts, but other than that, I was able to find the import players. I was able to find British players. So that was one of the big things for me. Wherever I worked, I wanted to have control for the roster building, simply because I felt I'm the first who's been made responsible for good reasons as a coach. You're the one responsible for results. But that's why I also wanted to have a say when it came down to building a roster.
I'd say I'd wondered someone like Moritz Wohlers, if you'd brought him in, obviously a German on the team.
Exactly. We needed a European player. I knew he came straight out of college. He wanted to prove himself. It didn't really feel like starting in the second division in Germany, but also didn't really get a chance in the first division right away. So I felt the Scottish Rocks were a good landing spot.
And look at the team. You obviously had the now late, much missed Rob Yanders, Sterling Davis, who of course became coach after you left, Maurice Hampton, Julius Joseph, and of course, a young Gareth Murray. He's only just recently left the Caledonia Gladiators, which, of course, is what the team is these days.
Yeah, well, I think we put some interesting talent together, and also interesting characters, and they all have their spot in basketball. Yeah, when you see what impressions Rob left, Julius still in the business. Sterling has been a great coach, and lately Gareth, who I met in the summer, actually when we were both scouting players for the new season. Yeah, so I'm happy I had the opportunity to coach really some special people.
So that's what, 18 years down the line, you still have all those contacts.
Yeah, like with some more, some less. But like the thing with Gareth was really special for me. So I obviously follow everything what the Rocks and now Gladiators do, and since I was their coach for a year, I'm now a big fan. And I was amazed how his career developed. He was a big international player, and then became a coach, and really a successful coach. So I was really happy when we were able to catch up in the summer, and it was we had some very fond memories.
And when you came into coach, then obviously you've been coaching in Germany, assistant coach. What did you change about the way the Rocks played?
Well, I felt it was too much one-on-one. It was too much freelance offense. I wanted to execute more through set plays and clear rules. You know, I'm German, and there's the typical thing about Germans that they're pretty big about rules and following them. And I think this is the flavor that I brought in. And I remember we lost the first three games, and there's Julius Joseph speaking to me as a co-captain and saying it in a very friendly way. And he's saying, like, Coach, you're doing a great job, but don't you think we should play a little bit more like we're used to? And I was tempted to give in, but I felt no. Let's give it a little bit more time. We need to get used to this style of basketball, and yeah, I think it was the right thing to do, because later on during the season we had the success we were hoping for.
Yeah, I mean, we talk about that year. You got to two finals. Now, if I remember correctly, weren't you ill or injured your back or something before a final? You were in danger of missing it. Was it the cup final, I think?
Yeah, like probably a week before. Um, I woke up in the middle of the night and I couldn't get out of bed. I couldn't move, so I had to be carried to the ambulance. And that was an interesting experience, because they wouldn't want to keep me in the hospital. But then again, I didn't know how to move out of it. So in the end, I slept on the floor of in my boss's living room, because I couldn't move on my own. But it got better, and yeah, like I made it to the finals the following week, and unfortunately we couldn't win it. But just making it there, I felt it was kind of a success.
That was the one. I think you came up just short against Guildford Heat, didn't you?
Yes.
Down in Birmingham, of course. And later on that season, you would get to the playoff final.
Yes. Yeah. Like I think we finished fourth during regular season, something like that. But was somewhat of a surprise that we made it to the finals. And then I think we faced Newcastle, but we couldn't beat them, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe you know better. But like people would say it was a success that we reached two finals, and I felt that way on the one hand, but on the other hand, if you reach a final, you want to win the final.
Then he just won a trophy not so long ago. It took him all those years to win something. So back then, that was actually seen as a big success for the club. So, I mean, oh yeah, you didn't win anything, but I still look back on that year for you as a very successful season, because you made two finals. Didn't win them, but the fact you made them showed that you were successful there. And then before we leave Braehead in Glasgow, what have you. What are any fond memories of that season? Any particular games or moments that stick out for you?
Well, I enjoyed the games against Newcastle the most because it felt like they were clearly superior. And for the most part, we gave them tough fights and we also won. So we had a lot of encounters with them, probably 6 games. I don't know exactly, but those games were great games. The Scottish fans were really pumped for those games, and also going to Newcastle. The crowds were great, and I really remember those matches as the ones that stuck out.
And of course, I must mention it. Of course, you were playing at Braehead, which is a multi-purpose arena. You probably had one of the nicer arenas in the league that year because there were a lot of old school venues back then.
Yes, and I'm not I'm not lying. I struggled with that. I remember going to Milton Keynes, going to Leicester. There were some tough places to play at, and I felt the quality of basketball was higher than the quality of some of those arenas. And I also felt this was one of the reasons that the British basketball wasn't quite as far as other national leagues in the continent of Europe were. So I'm happy this has changed now significantly. And I think this is a big part of how to promote a league.
And one thing I just wanted to add in there is obviously BBL was very, for me in those days, very insular, never looked towards Europe. The odd team would go and play in Europe. I think Guildford Heat might have done it round about then or the year after, and then, didn't do anything. And then we don't have teams entering Europe for years.
Yes.
Over recent seasons, obviously with the implosion of the BBL, now Super League over the summer, but what the Lions did in recent seasons, we've got Flyers and we've got Eagles entering EMBNL, which is a little regional competition. Obviously, Gladiators, the FIBA EuroCup. Do people in Europe now look differently at Britain, in your opinion?
It's starting to change, but like the respect, I would say, is still not entirely there. And it has a lot to do with are British teams willing to invest into also making their mark on the European landscape? Lately, they've tried, and I think that the team that has done the biggest steps were the London Lions. And they were also really able to bring in some big time names in basketball, in European basketball. So it's slowly starting to change. Unfortunately, they're not in the EuroCup this year. Like this would be big if there's a sustainable effort from the top British teams. But you can definitely see something is moving into the right direction.
But as we discussed before, I'm an Orm fan, and it was the biggest disappointment each year when the Lions were in EuroCup. They did not get Orm.
Like I was so much hoping for a draw, which gives us the chance to play in London. I really wanted to go back there and see how the basketball improved. So trust me, I was probably just as disappointed as you were.
Yeah, no, I was very disappointed with Hamburg. But saying that, I had some great chats with Ben Kabalowski when he came over because I was doing the sideline reporting one of the seasons, and it'd have been great because it would have been Anton Gavel at the time. I'd love to have interviewed him, but of course, we got Hamburg instead of Ulm. So that's the biggest disappointment for me. But anyway, we'll get back
I
on
even
track.
thought maybe we will get to that point when it's the knockout stage, but also that didn't happen.
No. I like I said, I was so disappointed. I was like, come on, please get on. Remember sitting watching the draw. Didn't happen. But anyway, getting back on track. You had that first season in Glasgow. What happened next?
Well, I had basically plans of staying there, and then like there were a couple of teams in Germany in the first division that must have followed my path a little bit and how we were doing. So to me, as a little bit of a surprise, Gießen, where I was working for quite a few years as an assistant coach, they offered me the head coaching position, and they offered me a 3-year deal. And I have to say that was really tempting, and that's why I made a really tough decision to leave Glasgow already after 1 year.
So it's the fact that a team that you had basically been assistant coach for, that was the pulling thing for you, because obviously you knew the club, didn't you?
That was one of the reasons, but also I felt simply the German league was at a higher level in my eyes than the British Basketball League was, and I wanted to prove myself on the next higher level.
You came back, you had your spell at Gießen, and then you went to Artland Dragons as well. Now, I want to bring up Artland Dragons because obviously Vince McCauley has just recently left there. You found Artland Dragons quite a tough gig as well, would it be fair to say? Because I think you don't want to bring up bad memories, but you missed the playoffs both seasons. Is that correct?
Yes. Basically, the clear goal was to make the playoffs, and even I think it's fair to say if we drop out the first round, people would not really consider this a success. So I think our ambition was to make it to the semis, something like that. And in both years, we didn't even make the playoffs. So there was definitely a disappointing stretch. We did better on the EuroCup level, but bread and butter in Germany is basically always the national competition, and there we struggled. So it was a fair thing to basically look for a new coach after that experience.
And I remember you had a short spell after that. Is it Osnabrück? Is that how you pronounce it?
Osnabrück, yes.
They were Pro A at
I
the
was
time, is that right?
unemployed for a half a season, and I was saying like it will be pretty hard to get back on a first division head coaching position. So I said, why not go through a second division job? Osnabrück offered me the job. We did pretty good. Then the club got into financial troubles, and in the end, we couldn't finish the season. The club went into the insolvency. And so overall, that wasn't the smartest decision on my end. But looking at pure basketball, we did good. We had quite a bit of success. And then a little bit, again, to my surprise, I was offered a first division job, and all wanted to sign me. And yeah, I didn't really expect that, but that was obviously one of the best moves for my career.
How did that come about? Did they approach you, or have they?
Yeah, they approached me. What I believe they liked was that I was German speaking, because they were about to move into the big arena we're playing in now, from a small school gym, basically moving into an arena. They knew there's challenges in convincing sponsors as well, so they wanted a person to talk to them. So those were a couple of reasons outside of the pure X's and O's on the basketball court. But what they also liked was my experience on the international level. A, with Glasgow. B, with the Artland Dragons, where we competed in the EuroCup and also in a FIBA challenge, I believe. And that my teams did quite well on those levels. They appreciate it because back then they already mentioned one of their long-term goals is to play international competitions, and they just finished a pretty average season, like they finished 14th. So they confronted me with somewhat high expectations, and I liked that. I liked the challenge about it.
Did they move into the Ratiopharm arena straight away in your first season, or was it later in the year?
It was later in the year. We knew we would move in December. So right now it's, I think, pretty exactly, nearly 14 years ago. We try to manage the schedule that we have as little home games as possible in the first part of the season. So I think out of the first 10 or 11 games, we only had 3 home games. We played it in the smaller gym. And everybody was expecting, okay, with such a tough start to the season, with such a tough schedule, they will be in trouble already come December. And it was the other way around. I think during those 10 or 11 games, we only lost 2 games, although the majority were on the road.
I'd say that first season, I mean, you had John Bryant on the team, won MVP. You won Coach of the Year. And in your first season in Ulm, you get all the way to the finals and face Bamberg. It's an amazing. I know, obviously, you got swept by Bamberg. Sorry, bringing that up again.
Yeah.
Of course, Bamberg, for anyone listening to it, they were the team at the time, weren't they?
Yeah, they were the team. And there's quite a few people saying that they had one of the best BDL teams ever that year. So they were stacked with talent. And yeah, we didn't really have a chance. We lost the first game in the finals by 40, the second game by 20. But we had a chance to go to overtime in game 3. We lost, I think, by 2 or 3 points. That was a tough one, but basically, realistically, even if we win one of those games, the next game would have been a blowout again. They were simply too good. But still, like making it to the finals was a huge accomplishment. I remember experts in basketball were saying Ulm is one of the highest, has one of the highest chances to drop out of the league, and then we make it to the finals.
I'd say, did expectations suddenly rise after that? Because you've had that dream, well, almost dream first season. Did people suddenly think, oh, hang on a minute, Ulm are on the rise. They could compete again next year?
Yeah, a little bit like that, but like they weren't really trusting this. They thought maybe it's a one-hit wonder. Let's see if they can sustain that, can hang on to it. Especially we lost a couple of good players after the first year, and we were able to hang on to it. Like I think the regular season we finished second or third. We lost in the semis the year on, the year after, but still, according to our budget, I would still consider it overperforming and a success.
I'd say, and yeah, you've had other great seasons as well in the BBL. I remember, I think one year you went 30-2 in the regular season. You got all the way to the semi-finals. I think Oldenburg beat you.
Yes, in game 5, we ran out of gas, and we like this was a tough season because everybody thought this year they have a chance also to beat Bamberg in the finals, but we didn't make it to the finals. We accomplished a special record, so we won 27 games in a row. The record we still hold, but yeah. We lost in the semis to Oldenburg, and that was definitely bitter because in that year I think we would have been a better challenger. We would have been a stronger opponent to Bamberg, who then won the finals.
I'd say Bamberg were the team, and if you were on the other side of the draw in the playoffs, you always had a good chance of getting there, but of course facing them. I think that was that Raymar Morgan? Was that
Raymar Morgan won the MVP in that year. We had Raymar Morgan, Augustin Rubit, Chris Babb, Braden Hobbs, Taylor Braun, Pergunter, obviously, Tim Olbrecht. We had a lot of good players.
So obviously you have another few seasons sort of up and down. And then in March 2019, it's announced that you'll be stepping down as coach and becoming sporting director. A couple of questions first. Was there a sporting director role while you were head coach? And also, how did this come about?
Well, my bosses felt there will be an easy transition because we never had a sporting director when I was the head coach. Well, I was basically covering those duties as well. A lot of responsibilities are in the field of recruiting. So I was in the fortunate position as a coach to recruit mainly together with our owner and CEO, Dr. Thomas Stolz. So we both were always putting the team together. And now as a sporting director, it became a 3-man challenge because now we had a coach, we had me, and we had Thomas. So all of a sudden, the job that had been done by two was divided by three.
And how did your day-to-day role change?
I'm not in the gym that often, so this is also one of the things I miss, like running people through drills, trying to get them to progress. This is really a fascinating element of basketball, and I don't have that anymore. But I also don't have the time to do that. All of a sudden, I'm responsible for the bigger picture. I'm not responsible for getting a win on the weekend, but making sure we will have a successful season and the club is going into the right direction. So it's less short-term work, it's more long-term work, especially developing an identity as an organization. Like often I felt when I was putting the teams together as a coach, we would do it in order to somewhat survive, but all of a sudden, or not all of a sudden, but it emerged that more and more we wanted to have a clear identity as a club, and we had the green light to build the Orange Campus, which was a huge step in our development as a program. So also that has to be developed. So I would say the biggest difference was, as a coach, you think short term, you want to win the next game. You're miserable if you don't. And as a sports director, you focus more on the long-term success of an organization.
When I'm doing a EuroCup commentary of Ulm, the cameras often will point to you sitting there at the side. What's it like for you now when you're obviously watching the team? Are you still sort of coaching in your head a bit, or are you just thinking, just in trying to enjoy the game as much as possible?
Probably both is not entirely correct. Like, I'm not enjoying it. I'm still under too much adrenaline because I obviously want the team to do well. But I'm also not coaching because I have zero power in that moment. Yeah, like I cannot tell the coach, hey, sub this guy in. I cannot tell the player, make the extra pass. So I'm really without any kind of power when I sit next to the team. And that's why I accept my fate in that regard. I just observe the game, and after the game, I might have a conversation with the coach or with players. But during the game, I have nothing really to do. But I also am not in a position where I can enjoy it because there's too much pressure and adrenaline going on.
So there's no emotion because you're quite. I'm trying to think of where stoic is probably not the word. You're quite reserved.
It's quite a emotion still. People say I became calmer, which is probably true, but I'm still not calm. Like a basketball game that I follow on the sideline without coaching actively is still stressful to me. I go through a lot of emotions. I simply don't take an active role in a game like that.
Since you stepped in the sporting director role, you've had Jaka Lakovic, you've had Anton Gavel, and now you've got Ty Harrelson, all different coaches. What have they brought to the team with their own styles of coaching?
With Lakovic, what I always enjoyed was or admires was the combination of the traditional Balkan style of basketball coaching, but he mixed in the Spanish and the American way of coaching. So in him you find the mixture of three really highly regarded basketball cultures. And on top of that, I would say he's an empathic coach, which is important in my eyes in modern basketball. So I simply really liked that he was able to take the best from all three basketball cultures. With Anton Gavel, you get the the biggest competitor that there is. He was never the biggest talent, but you would always want to have him on your team because he's so competitive and he makes others better. And I was amazed how well he did that as a coach. He didn't really learn being a coach. He does it by nature. When you see him on the court running a practice, you see how all the players they have big eyes and they follow they follow everything he's doing and they do it with similar passion because he's so persuasive in what he's doing. So he's really great on the pitch and with Ty Harrelson, you have a combination of both what Jaka and Anton gave, like great teacher, really great teacher, guy who has extensive knowledge about basketball, a guy who's not afraid to play young players and to give them confidence. And so he fits perfectly. We were looking for a coach who's not focused on results only, but is willing to invest and be patient, especially since we have a lot of young players. And you couldn't imagine a better coach for our young guys.
I'd like to bring up as well, one of your long-serving assistant coaches, Ty McCoy. He's been there since you were coach and has stayed on the bench throughout the next three coaches. What's it like having someone like Ty providing continuity on the bench for you?
Now, our club stands for development, and we are trying to promote players. We're trying to promote coaches. We're trying to promote employees, and we're actually we're not a club that demands, well, you got to finish your career here. You got to finish your contract here. Whereas for us, it's a testament of success if a player becomes so good that we cannot keep him, or if a coach becomes so good that EuroLeague teams look at him. But at the same time, with that approach, you need to have people who inherit that identity, who really know what this club is about. And Tyron is the prime example here. And for him, it would be easy to be a head coach. He was a head coach. He could be a head coach any day, and he would be a successful head coach. So we are super fortunate that we were able to convince him to stay on board as an assistant coach. He's very well connected. He knows X's and O's really in a great fashion. He's well regarded by players. So when you have young coaches and somewhat inexperienced coaches, and all three of them were falling into that category. Jaka hadn't been a head coach. Anton hadn't been the head coach in the BBL level, and Ty has only coached 1 year in the BBL. So the label inexperience is somewhat legit. But when you have that, it's super important to have an assistant coach who's been through a lot in this league. And I think Ty is a perfect match for us as a club, and we're super fortunate we have him.
And of course, he's got that head coach experience. But I can also remember doing a EuroCup commentary. I think you were away at Budapest, and Jaka had to miss the game, and he led them to victory.
Yeah, well, he coached them during that stint. He coached 3 games, and he won all 3 of them. Yeah, so I know there's been interest by a couple of teams to sign him, and I have to say we're super fortunate that he decided against him and decided to stay as an assistant coach in Ulm.
Yeah, I know assistant coaches don't get much love in basketball, but I figured Ty McCoy is someone I felt we should really mention. Let's get back to the playing side, and I want to bring you forward to 2023 and what I consider one of the greatest playoff runs ever when you won the title. I mean, you beat Berlin 3-1 in the opening seed. And now you were the 7th seed, weren't you? So you beat the 2nd seed in the first thing. Then you go and sweep Bayern Munich. And then in the finals, you come against Bonn. I think it was 3-1. Of course, Bonn had won the BCL that year. And
Yes.
you swept. Not only you were the lowest seed ever to win the title, but you also the first team to ever beat the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd seeds in the same player series. And I remember that because it's one of the few times when I've been able to watch German league games online. And for me, that was just one of the most amazing playoff runs that I've ever seen. Just what were your memories of that time?
You put it together in a very nice way, but I recall it very similar. Like it was simply amazing. And the nice thing is nobody can really say, well, you were lucky in those playoffs, because we definitely had the toughest schedule. We didn't have home court advantage in one series. We played against Berlin, who were the former champions, if I'm not mistaken.
They were 3-time champions at that point, weren't they?
Yes. And we beat them, and we beat them convincingly, not like in a lucky game 5 or something like that. And then we play against Bayern Munich, the team with the biggest budget and with the highest ambitions. And we sweep them without home court advantage. So we won twice on their court. And then we play against the hottest team, probably not only in Germany, but one of the hottest teams in whole Europe, with a great coach, with great players, and we even beat them convincingly. So I still sometimes feel what Anton Gavell and Tara McCoy did there didn't get enough praise, because it was fantastic. In fact, we were the only non-EuroLeague team that won a national title. In all the other leagues, Greece, Spain, Italy, France, the EuroLeague team would win the title. We were the only team that went against that rule. And it definitely was a huge success, and to me, a true miracle, I would say.
What did it mean to the club, to Ulm itself? Because this was your first title, wasn't it?
Exactly. I think I would say it meant everything. And the way it happened was so special, because we didn't go out, we never went out there and said, we want to win the title this year. We went out there and we said, we want to be special when it comes to developing players. We want to be known for, okay, this club goes bigger risks, and with that strategy, they can attract certain players, not with the most money, but with a strategy behind it. And in that year, I remember out of the first 11 games, we lost 9 of them. With a coach who had never coached a BBL game, and a lot of people were saying, well, this time you went too far, you went too big of a risk, because you also signed an 18-year-old point guard who had never played in Germany, and a 23-year-old point guard who had never been in Europe. And people were saying, oh, this time it gets you. You were too crazy, and you were going too big of a risk. And in the end, we win the championship, and it was because of going those risks, I believe.
Just for reference, when you say 18, 23-year-old, you're referring to Juan Nunez and Iago dos Santos, is that correct?
That is correct, yes.
I mean, Dos Santos and obviously Bruno Caboclo as well. Yeah, it's just a wonderful team. I mean, you had Brandon Paul, gave you that veteran presence down the stretch. Obviously, Kareem Yallow's on there. You got Tommy Clipeyes. It was a really, really good team. It felt to me that it was underperforming, because I felt you had a deep roster that year.
We had a lot of injuries too. We had Philipp Herkenhoff with an injury. We had injury problems at the 5 spot in general. So people forgot we even signed Devin Robinson, who's now doing great for Ljubljana. He was on a temporary deal. Unfortunately, we couldn't convince him to stay longer because he had a great offer from Manresa back then. But we were struggling with injuries, and that's why we had to react. But we didn't panic. Like, I think for 2 months we played with David Fuchs, who's now playing at Rhode Island. He got major minutes at the 5 spot because we said we don't just want to take one replacement, but we got to take the right replacement. So we were waiting and trying to convince Bruno Caboclo to come over, and it took him a bit to be convinced. But when he finally decided, I think everything turned out great for him and for us, obviously.
I can't remember the game, but I remember he had 33 points one night in a EuroCup game, which tied the club record in EuroCup. He was just unbelievable that night. And of course, we've seen what he's been able to do since then. But when you look back on that year, like I said, for people listening who might not know, Ulm is not a huge city, is it?
No, it's a small city. Like Ulm itself has, I think, about 130,000 inhabitants, and there's New Ulm next to it. So we would call our club a club of both cities. New Ulm has 30 to 40,000. So overall, you're talking about less than 200,000 here, and I'd consider that a small city.
So what did it mean then to the people of Ulm when you lift that title?
Well, everything came up in a perfect fashion. You could tell the people really here like and appreciate basketball, and they were hoping for this club to win that title. And when we won it, it might be a small thing, but for me it really was big. Like, we won that game on a Friday night, so we had 2 days of partying. And normally that final could be Tuesday, and until you start the festivities, everybody forgot about it. But we could party on Saturday, we could party on Sunday, and we had the most beautiful weather. And I felt the gods of basketball really wanted us to go through this beautiful weekend.
And even though you weren't the coach, you were the sport director, where does this sit in your favorite moments of your career? Is this number one?
Yeah, I would say it's number one. And to me, it doesn't really matter if I'm the coach, if I'm the assistant coach, if I'm handing out water. And this is what I also try to get across to everybody who's working here. They all play a role in it. Yes, the players get the blame. Yes, the coaches get the blame, and it's good. But whoever's working in the back of this organization has also a share of this success.
I want to bring you around to EuroCup because we've got through most of this without mentioning much about EuroCup, which of course is how I obviously follow the team mostly. I'm a firm believer that playing in a pan-European competition like EuroCup often helps when it comes to recruiting players. Would you agree or disagree? And what would be your reasons?
I agree 100%. Like, for us, it's one of the ultimate recruiting tools. If I want to attract the talent that we were able to attract in the past, I would only be able to do that with a vehicle of offering playing time also in the EuroCup. I think EuroCup is the second highest competition in European club basketball, and it's a great platform for a lot of players who come to Europe for the first time, or young players like Juan Nunez, Pacom Dadier this year, Ben Saraf, and Noah Isengwe, who want to leave a mark on the international basketball and want to be seen by EuroLeague clubs or maybe NBA clubs. So the EuroCup is a great platform for the players we're trying to get here, and we wouldn't get those players if we only played national competition.
And how much does the Orange Academy play a part in developing players? Because obviously that's your junior setup, isn't it?
Exactly. This is our farm team. They compete in the 3rd division. I think we're the youngest, or one of the 2, or maybe 3 youngest teams in the league. We don't sign any veterans usually. We basically want to hand responsibility to players at a really young age and give them a platform where they can play major minutes. And at the same time, those players who are really talented, they should also already get practice time with us and here and there playing time. And we can give that playing time a little bit easier in the EuroCup competition. Like I said before, bread and butter to most of the clubs here in Germany is the BBL. But if you have a second competition where you may want to rest the veteran player or where you want to go with a deeper rotation, you can do that in the EuroCup. Yeah? And the beautiful thing is we've done it in the EuroCup and we've still had a decent share of success. We I think with the exception of 1 year, we always made it to the next stage of the competition. Was it a group stage or was it the knockout stage? But we usually advance, and we advance although we play those young guys who are somewhat inexperienced.
Do you get a lot of scouts come in to watch your games? Because you've had players that have gone on to be drafted in the NBA. Obviously, one Nunez, one the most recent. I mean, a lot of players are looking at Noah Sengue at the moment. Do you find a lot of people come in to watch your games?
Yeah,
Just
I think the like we already had 2 GMs coming over this season. We obviously have lots of scouts at every game. I think there hasn't been one game without an NBA scout. The highest number of clubs there were this year were at one game with 9, I believe. Last year, the highest number were 15 NBA teams at one game. And the biggest success we had this year was obviously when we played the exhibition game against the Portland Trailblazers in Portland. Portland people were telling me there were about 100 scouts there. And out of those 100 scouts, probably 5 to 10 GMs.
is that what Brad Stevens? I remember watching a game and Brad Stevens was sitting on the sideline from the Celtics.
Yeah, Brad Stevens was one of the two that I can recall. Trajan Langdon was the other one, and they made their effort to come to Europe. But I also know that a lot of people came to Portland when we played the Trailblazers.
I'm going to wrap up EuroCup. I'm going to ask you, memory-wise, any games stand out for you when you were coaching, or even since you become sporting director in EuroCup itself? I mean, I'll give you a couple personally. I remember you had because I did the game, a 2 overtime win at Cedevita, which is just a crazy game when Per Gunther was still playing for you. My very first games in EuroCup was against Tofaş Bursa and then Granca. I think Per Gunther led the comeback that day. But of course, you had that a couple of years ago. You had that great win in the 8th finals at Badalona because they were one of the favourites to win the competition that year. You didn't have a great year, but you made the playoffs and then went there and beat them.
Yeah, they didn't have lost one home game in the whole competition. We finished 8th, they finished 1st, and we were able to beat them. And then we had a really narrow loss to Bologna in the quarterfinals. So I think that was a great run back then. When I was coaching, one of the best memories I have, it was a road game at Red Star Belgrade, and they just came back from winning the cup against Partizan. That they were all hyped. Maybe they didn't take the game too serious, but it was a packed stadium at Pioneer. Security all over the place. I've never experienced something like that before. And really a great atmosphere. And we come there as a true nobody. We actually played a lot of zone, and John Bryant fouled out very early. So we won it with Keaton Nankivell as the backup center. And that was still a great win and something I have great memories about.
Yeah, the atmospheres there can be absolutely crazy, can't they? It's always, when it's Zvezda or Partizan, it's always going to be a crazy atmosphere, isn't it?
Yes, and I haven't had the opportunity to be live at that game between those two teams, but this is definitely on my bucket list.
I want to bring you on to something that's happened in recent years. I want to know if there's a connection or it's just coincidence. You've had quite a few good Brazilian players come to Ulm. I mean, I remember Cristiano Felicio. Obviously, we mentioned Dos Santos and Caboclo. You had Jorginho last season. That's correct, isn't it? And then
Yeah.
obviously you got Santos this year. What
Yes.
is it? Have you got some sort of scouting network out there? Is it just the way it's happened? It's
We're
just
too
like four
small
years in
to
a
have
row.
a we're too small to have a scouting network. We do this on our own. But it started with a coincidence. Like one agency reached out to us asking, would we be interested in Cristiano Felicio? And he wasn't the first former NBA player who's been offered to us, but usually there's something shady around an offer like that. Like he wants too much money or he's coming from an injury. Something's wrong usually. But here it wasn't, and we agreed. And I think looking back, everybody would say this was a success for both sides. So with that experience in mind, um, people saw, well, Ulm might be a good platform for Brazilian players. And we had more agents reaching out to us and offering those players. And with the first few good experiences, we focused a little bit more on that market and followed that market. And that's why it was easy for us to go with a guy like Jorginho, or this year with Marcio Santos, because we followed that league probably a little bit closer than others might do.
Yeah, I just wondered, had you suddenly set up some sort of network? Because it just seems like 4 years in a row. And for the most part, they've all turned out really, really well. I mean, I think probably the standout has to be Dos Santos, especially what he has gone on to do. I mean, he is just an amazing player. And
Yeah.
speaking purely as a commentator, he's a great player to commentate on because he gets you excited because he comes up with those plays. Um,
He's one of those guys where you think, well, probably this level might be too much for him, and then he will prove you wrong immediately. Like it doesn't matter. Yeah, like he sees a challenge, he takes the challenge. He's so excited about being challenged, and he loves to prove everybody wrong, and he does it with a smile on his face, and that's why I can sign that off. What you're saying, it must be a beauty to commentate this game because the, the way he plays, this is how people enjoy basketball. This is how people enjoy watching basketball. It's just fun to see him play. How competitive he is, how creative he is, how tough he is, and that obviously with a body that's not necessarily the prototype the prototype basketball body.
And I think I saw on social media a few weeks ago, he actually came back and visited the club again, didn't he? So he still has that connection with Ulm.
Yes, that was beautiful, and that probably means more to me than great results, certain success. That players can still relate and have fond memories and like to keep contact and love to come back. That probably means the most for me because it means they really felt home when they were playing.
And I want to finish on Ulm. I just want to not put you on the spot, but just ask you, looking back over your time with Ratiopharm Ulm, who have been your favourite players to play for the club? Or can you not answer that because you don't want to?
Well, this is really, really a tough question because there have been so many. Like probably me as a coach, I have a deeper connection to players than now me as a sports director because I simply deal with them more. So if I had to refer to players, I probably take the ones I was coaching personally. And then it's obvious. Per Günther means so much to me. He was the only one there all those 8 years I coached this team. So yes, I have the tightest connection here, and he's also such a fabulous basketball player and fabulous person to speak to and have a conversation with. So I have to put him at number one. But behind that, there's probably more than 5 or 10 players I should mention, because they all played an important part in the Ratiopharm Ulm journey, and in this way also in my journey.
Yeah, I'm glad you say about Per, because he's one of my favorite Orm players, because he was there every season. Because obviously in basketball, you get so much turnover on rosters, but he kept coming back year after year. And I always say, such disappointment. He retired that year before you won the title. Of course, you never know when you're going to win a title, but he was so loyal to that team.
I can tell you one thing. I mentioned the people in the back who don't get the praise. To me, and Per might see it different, I don't care. To me, this success is definitely also Per Günther's success. Definitely. Like he played a major role in that success. And what did he stand for? Like when we had him, we probably didn't know, but he's the perfect player to resemble what Ratiopharm Ulm stands for. Like courageous, basically don't give a damn about what people might think, what the press might think. Like we do it our way, and against all odds. Yeah, like he was smaller than everybody, he was lighter than everybody, and against all odds, he was one of the best players this club ever had. And on top of that, he was a person, or he is a person that can voice a great opinion. You can have great discussions with. He's way more than just basketball, and I also think that's very important. Yeah, like basketball is great, and we all enjoy it, but there's way more to life than basketball, and also he stands for that. So I feel what I would like to see in this club, I see in Per Günther in every fashion.
Yeah, I met him for the first time in person in Berlin at the EuroLeague Final Four, because obviously he works for German TV these days.
Yeah.
But it's just a great player to commentate. And again, like with Dos Santos, he was one of those players that I could get excited over when he made a big basket, because he had that knack of making the key baskets at the right time, especially with the comeback or the go-ahead basket. It'd be someone like Per who would normally make it. Would you agree with that? He
Yeah,
had that clutch.
but this is a question of personality and attitude. He's totally fearless, and he's totally focused. He's super professional in those moments, and he simply knows what it takes. And that's why I had the privilege as a coach of not having to do that much. Like people would criticize me for not taking that many timeouts or timeouts in the right moment. But I always felt there's this one little guy out there who has control. I don't have to do that much. And trust me, it's a privilege. I've seen other point guards struggle. With him, I never had the feeling he's losing control on the court. I need to step in here. He was always in total control.
Obviously, we know Per is now retired. Who's sort of taken that mantle on the team? Because obviously, Tommy's been around for a few seasons now. Kareem Yallow's been around for a few seasons. Nicholas Pretzel. Who is sort of taken on that role at the club?
Well, you couldn't give that one-on-one to the next guy, because Per did so much, and Per's unique in his approach. I felt the positive aspect of what we're trying to do is covered by Tommy Kleephuis. The grittiness is probably covered by Karim Jallow. Yes, and both guys have been great leaders. They really identify with the club. They really try to get it to the next level. So I would say those two guys, they're perfect leaders for our organization.
I think I am done. Before I go and wrap up, is there anything you would like to talk about the club, or anything in particular? This is I always ask everybody in an interview, is there something you'd like to mention?
I don't know if it makes sense on a podcast, but I love people who are excited about basketball and who really love watching what we're doing, and that's why I'm so happy I have the privilege of being in this podcast, because I know you're a basketball enthusiast, and I like to surround myself with people like that.
It's been an absolute pleasure to have you on the podcast. I'm finally glad to catch up. I think I met you once back when you were coaching the Rocks. That's a long time ago. So to sit down and actually have a nice long chat with you today about my favourite German team has been absolutely wonderful. Thank you so much for joining the podcast today.
Thanks for having me.
And finally, if you're enjoying what we do, please make sure to like, subscribe, or even share the pod on your social media. Every little bit of support helps. Until next time, my name's Niall Gray. Thanks for listening. You've been listening to the Euro Step Brit podcast, a hoops and hockey production.